The sound of rain tapping against the office window was the only thing breaking the silence. It was late past 9. The rest of the team had gone home hours ago. Only Emily Carter and Daniel Hayes remained, buried in the chaos of an unfinished presentation due the next morning. Emily leaned over her desk, trying to gather the scattered papers that had fallen. Her back ached, and her patience was hanging by a thread. That's when she heard his footsteps behind her. Daniel's deep voice broke the silence. "Careful, Emily, you're going to hurt yourself doing everything alone." She smiled faintly without turning around. "I'm fine, just trying to get this last chart together before the client meeting." Daniel crouched beside her to help pick up the papers. Their hands brushed for a second, just long enough to make her heart skip. It was the kind of brief contact that meant nothing, and somehow, everything. He looked at her. His usual confident expression softened. "You don't have to do all of this by yourself," he said quietly. Emily straightened up, brushing her hair from her face. "If I don't, who will? You know how the boss gets if we're not perfect." Daniel leaned against the desk. "Then let me help. We're a team, remember?" She glanced at him, trying to ignore the warmth rising in her chest. Daniel wasn't just her coworker. He'd been her mentor, her friend, and maybe, though she'd never say it aloud, the one person who made the long days bearable. They worked side by side for the next hour. Every so often, their eyes met across the glowing computer screen. Each glance lingered a little longer than it should have. When Emily bent down again to plug in her laptop cable, her hand slipped. Daniel instinctively reached out and caught her before she could fall. For a heartbeat. The world went still. She could feel his breath near her ear, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her shoulder. Neither of them moved. Then Daniel stepped back, his voice low. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," she whispered, unable to meet his gaze. Something had shifted between them. The air felt heavier now, charged with something neither of them dared name. A few minutes later, as Emily tried to focus on her work, Daniel spoke again. "Emily, can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Sure." He hesitated, his usual calmness gone. "Why do you always push yourself so hard? You're the first one here, the last one to leave. You act like the world depends on you." Her lips tightened. "Maybe because it does. I can't afford to mess up. Not again." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean, not again?" Emily froze. The words had slipped out before she could stop them. Her past wasn't something she talked about, not here, not with anyone. She forced a smile. "Forget I said that, let's just finish this project." But Daniel didn't drop it. His eyes stayed on her, searching, gentle but insistent. "You know you can tell me, right?" Emily turned away, pretending to focus on the laptop screen. "There's nothing to tell." He sighed softly but didn't press further. Instead, he grabbed his jacket. "All right, then I'll grab us some coffee. You're not getting through the night without caffeine." As soon as he left, Emily exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together. Her eyes drifted to the reflection of the city lights outside the window. So much of her life had been about running from mistakes, from memories, from the person she used to be. And now, somehow, Daniel was making her want to stop running. When he returned with 2 cups of coffee, he smiled like nothing had changed. But Emily could tell something had. As midnight approached, they finished the presentation. The tension that had hovered between them all evening still hung in the air. Unspoken but undeniable. Emily gathered her things and walked toward the elevator. Daniel followed, holding the door for her. As the doors closed, she finally looked at him. "Thanks for staying late. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. "You don't have to do life alone, Emily." His words landed softly but deeply, and before she could respond, the elevator doors opened and her phone buzzed. A message, from a number she hadn't seen in years. Her face went pale. Daniel noticed instantly. "Emily, what's wrong?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. The message read, "I'm back in town. We need to talk." Emily stood frozen in the elevator, the soft hum of the machinery fading into the background. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the message again, the words burning into her mind. "I'm back in town. We need to talk." She hadn't seen that number in almost 3 years. She'd deleted every message, every photo, every trace of the person who'd sent it, or at least she thought she had. Daniel stepped closer, concern written across his face. "Emily, who is it?" Her mouth went dry. "It's no one. Just someone I used to know." Daniel didn't believe her, but he didn't push. Instead, he offered quietly, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe she had by the time they reached the parking garage. The rain had turned into a downpour. Emily stood under the dim yellow light, staring at her phone, debating whether to reply. Daniel handed her his umbrella. "Take this. You'll get soaked." She blinked, pulled from her thoughts. "What about you?" He shrugged. "I don't mind the rain." She managed a faint smile. "Thank you for everything tonight." "Anytime," he said, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment too long. "Text me when you get home." "All right." Emily nodded and hurried to her car. As she sat behind the wheel, she finally opened her messages again. Her heart pounded as she typed back. "What do you want?" The reply came instantly. "Closure. You owe me that much." She closed her eyes, pain rushing back like a flood. Ryan. Her ex. Fiancé. The man she'd left without a word the night before their wedding. She thought she'd buried that part of her life forever. The next morning, Emily walked into the office looking like she hadn't slept. Daniel noticed immediately. "Late night?" he asked gently. She gave a half-hearted laugh. "Something like that." They worked in silence for a while, but Emily could feel Daniel's gaze on her every few minutes, steady, patient, as if waiting for her to open up. Finally, she spoke. "Do you ever feel like your past won't let you go?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "Yeah. More often than I'd like to admit." Emily hesitated. "Someone from mine just showed up again. Someone I thought I'd never see." "Someone who hurt you?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "And someone I hurt too." Daniel leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You don't owe anyone your peace, Emily. Not even closure, if it comes at that price." His words settled deep inside her, but the truth was she didn't feel free. Not yet. She still remembered Ryan's face the night she walked away. The confusion, the betrayal, the silence that followed. That silence had haunted her ever since. Later that afternoon, she received another text. "Meet me tomorrow at 7. Same place. You'll know where." Her stomach tightened. She hadn't been to that spot in years, the little park by the river where Ryan had proposed. She didn't reply, but deep down, she knew she would go. The next day felt endless. Every minute dragged. Daniel noticed her distraction, but when he asked, she brushed him off. At 6:58, Emily arrived at the park. The air was cold, the trees bare, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gray. She spotted him almost immediately. Ryan stood by the old wooden bench, hands in his pockets, looking both older and heartbreakingly familiar. When he turned and saw her, he smiled faintly. "Hey, Em." Her chest tightened. "Ryan." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the river filled the silence between them. He finally said, "You look good. Different, but good." "Thanks." He studied her for a long moment. "You didn't even say goodbye. One day, we were planning a life together, and the next, you were gone." "Why?" Emily looked down, her throat tight. "Because I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you that I wasn't ready. Not ready to get married. Not ready to be loved," she whispered. Ryan's face softened. "Emily, you didn't just break my heart. You shattered my trust in everything. I spent years trying to understand what I did wrong." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong. It was me. I was broken, and I didn't want to break you too." They stood in silence for a while. Ryan finally sighed. "I guess I just needed to hear it. To know it wasn't all in my head." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Ryan. Truly." He gave a small, sad smile. "I forgive you." And just like that, something inside her loosened. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't pretty, but it was closure. As she turned to leave, Ryan said softly, "You've changed, Emily. I hope whoever's in your life now sees what I couldn't." Her steps faltered. "There's no one." "Then maybe there should be," he said gently. That night, back in her apartment, Emily stared at the city lights outside her window. Her heart felt lighter. But something new had taken its place, a quiet longing she couldn't ignore. She thought of Daniel, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd stayed when no one else did, and before she could second guess it, she picked up her phone and typed a message. "Hey, are you still awake?" The reply came almost instantly. "Always. What's up?" She hesitated, then sent, "Can we talk?" Emily's thumb hovered over the phone screen, her heart thudding as she watched the typing dots appear. She had almost talked herself out of it, almost decided to leave the message unsent, but Daniel replied before she could change her mind. "Of course. Do you want to call, or should I come over?" She hesitated. It was already past 10. The kind of hour when thoughts got tangled and emotions ran too close to the surface. After a few seconds, she typed, "Come over. I just need to talk." 20 minutes later, there was a gentle knock on her apartment door. Emily opened it to find Daniel standing there, reins still glistening on his jacket, hair slightly damp, and eyes full of quiet concern. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. Her apartment was small but warm. The faint scent of vanilla candles filled the air. Daniel took in the sight stacks of books, a cozy couch, the faint hum of soft jazz from the speakers. It felt exactly like her calm on the outside, full of quiet storms beneath. They sat down, facing each other. Daniel's voice broke the silence first. "So, what happened?" Emily took a deep breath. "It was my ex, Ryan. He came back." Daniel's brows lifted slightly, but his tone stayed even. And I met him," she said. "He wanted closure, and I think I needed it too." He nodded slowly. "That's good, right?" "I thought it would be," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now I just feel empty, like I gave a part of myself away, and I don't know what's left." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Maybe that's not emptiness. Maybe it's space for something new." Emily met his eyes, startled by the quiet conviction in his tone. "Something new, something better," he said gently. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No words, no explanations, just a shared silence that said everything neither dared to speak. Finally, Emily broke the moment. "Daniel, why do you always show up when I need someone most?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe because I've been where you are, lost, hurt, pretending to be fine." She asked. Surprised, he nodded. "A few years ago, I was engaged to, didn't work out. She wanted a life I couldn't give." Emily frowned. "You never mentioned that." "I try not to," he said, his voice low. "But it taught me something. Sometimes the right people find us only after we've lost everything we thought we wanted." Those words hit her harder than she expected. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft. "Do you ever feel like fate keeps putting two people in the same place for a reason?" He smiled, small, knowing, and a little sad. Every day, they talked for hours. About work, about life, about the quiet loneliness that came with trying to hold everything together. By the time the clock struck midnight, Emily realized she hadn't felt this comfortable in years. She laughed at something he said, a genuine, unguarded laugh that caught even her by surprise. Daniel smiled at the sound. "I missed that." "Missed what?" "That laugh. You've been so serious lately." Emily shook her head, smiling softly. "Guess I forgot how to laugh." "Well," Daniel said, standing, "I'll remind you as often as I can." She stood too, walking him to the door. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel said quietly, "Emily, I meant what I said. You don't have to go through life alone." Her heart beat faster. "And if I don't want to?" His gaze held hers. "Then maybe it's time you let someone in." The air between them grew heavy with something unspoken. Not tension, something gentler, deeper. Emily's voice trembled. "Good night, Daniel." He smiled softly. "Good night, Emily." When the door closed behind him, Emily leaned against it, her pulse still racing. She hadn't expected to feel this way again. Not after Ryan. Not after everything. But the warmth in Daniel's eyes lingered long after he'd gone. The next morning, Emily arrived at work early. Daniel was already there, coffee in hand, waiting by her desk. He handed her a cup with a small grin. "Double-shot latte. I figured you'd need it." She took it, smiling. "You're learning my habits too well." "Occupational hazard," he said lightly. But then his tone shifted, becoming softer. "About last night, I just want you to know. I'm here. No expectations. Just here." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." Before she could say more, their manager walked in, breaking the moment. Emily quickly busied herself with her laptop, but she could feel Daniel's presence beside her. Reassuring, grounding. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone in the world that evening. When everyone had gone, Daniel stopped by her desk again. "Want to grab dinner?" he asked casually, but his eyes told her it wasn't casual at all. She hesitated, then smiled. "Sure." They went to a small Italian restaurant downtown, tucked away from the noise of the city, the kind of place where time slowed down. They talked easily, laughter flowing between them. Emily couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so at peace. But just as the waiter brought dessert, Emily's phone buzzed. A new message. From Ryan. "I heard about you and your coworker. Be careful, he's not who you think." Her smile faded. She felt a chill creep down her spine. Daniel noticed immediately. "Hey, what's wrong?" Emily looked up slowly, the phone trembling in her hand. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." Daniel's expression shifted instantly. His usual calm/steady look gave way to concern. What do you mean, Emily? What's going on? Emily hesitated, gripping her phone tightly. The message on the screen glared up at her like a warning she didn't want to read twice. She turned the phone toward him. This, she whispered. Ryan sent it. He said, "You're not who I think you are." Daniel frowned, leaning closer to read it. Then he leaned back slowly, letting out a long breath. I see. That's all you're going to say? She asked, voice shaking. Do you know what he's talking about? He looked down for a moment before meeting her gaze again. Yeah, I think I do. The air around them grew heavy. The soft music of the restaurant faded beneath the rush of blood in Emily's ears. Daniel, she said carefully, whatever this is, I need you to be honest with me. He nodded. I will be, but not here. Can we go somewhere quiet? Emily swallowed hard, her stomach twisting. All right. They walked to the nearby park, the same one where Emily had met Ryan only the day before. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet earth and pine. Streetlights cast long, golden reflections across the pavement. They sat on a bench under an old oak tree. Daniel's hands rested loosely on his knees, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Emily, I didn't plan on you finding out like this, but yes, Ryan and I know each other. Emily's breath caught. What? How? I didn't know it was him at first, Daniel said, his voice low and steady. But when I heard his last name mentioned during a call a few weeks ago, I realized who he was. Her heart pounded. You're saying you knew? And you didn't tell me? I wanted to, Daniel said, but you were already hurting. I thought bringing him up would make it worse. Daniel, what kind of connection do you even have with him? He hesitated. Ryan used to work for my company. A few years back, before I joined this firm, he was part of a project that fell apart. It ended badly, very badly. He blamed me for it. Said I ruined his career. Emily's head spun. So he's trying to get back at you. Maybe? Daniel said quietly. Or maybe he's just trying to pull you back into his story. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deceit, but all she saw was exhaustion and honesty. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She whispered. He looked at her with a mixture of regret and something deeper. Because the moment I realized who he was, I knew you'd stop trusting me. And Emily, that was the last thing I wanted. Emily's chest ached. She didn't know what to feel: betrayal, confusion, or the strange, fierce pull that still drew her to him. She turned away, staring at the dark water glinting under the streetlights. I don't know what to think, Daniel. I don't expect you to, he said softly, but I need you to know everything I've said to you. Everything I feel, it's real. Ryan has his version of the truth. So do I, but my feelings for you have nothing to do with him. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. Daniel, she whispered, still unsure. I just need time. He nodded. Then take it. I'll wait. The next few days passed in a blur. Emily buried herself in work, avoiding long conversations, keeping her distance from Daniel even when he was only a few desks away. He didn't push. He gave her space, but his quiet presence never faded. He still greeted her in the mornings, still left her coffee on her desk, still offered help when she struggled with a project, and each time, her heart ached a little more, because she could feel the truth in every small act by Friday. She couldn't stand the silence any longer. After work, she walked to Daniel's office. He was packing up his laptop, ready to leave. Daniel, she said, her voice trembling. Can we talk? He nodded, closing the laptop. Of course. They sat by the large office window overlooking the city. The evening light painted everything in shades of amber and gray. I've been thinking, she began slowly, about everything, about Ryan, about what you said. He stayed quiet, letting her speak. I realized something, she continued. Ryan hurt me, but I hurt him too. And maybe that's why I couldn't trust anyone again. I thought love only led to pain, but then you came along. And I... Her voice broke. Daniel reached out gently, not touching her yet, just waiting. She looked up at him, tears glimmering. I'm scared. Daniel, scared to start over? Scared to be wrong again. He met her eyes. Then let's not call it starting over. Let's call it beginning something new, something honest. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the city below. Then Emily took a slow breath and reached for his hand. Okay, she whispered. Something new. He squeezed her hand lightly, his smile small but full of relief. You don't know how long I've wanted to hear that. Emily laughed through her tears. You really are stubborn. And patient, he said, smiling wider now, mostly patient. Just as the moment settled between them, Emily's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and froze. A new message. From Ryan. You think you know him now. Ask him why he really left his old company. Her smile faded. Daniel saw the look in her eyes and knew. What did he say this time? He asked quietly. Emily looked at him, her voice barely audible. He said, "There's something else I don't know about you." Emily's pulse quickened as the phone screen glowed between them. Daniel's name. Ryan's message. 2 lives, both connected to hers. Both holding pieces of a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Daniel's jaw tightened. He's not going to stop, is he? Emily's voice shook. Daniel, what did he mean? Why did you really leave your old company? For a moment, he said nothing. He just looked out the window at the city lights reflecting off the glass towers across the street. When he finally spoke, his tone was combat heavy. I left because of him, Daniel said quietly. Because of Ryan. Emily frowned. I don't understand. Daniel turned back to her. 3 years ago, we were on the same project team. It was a huge contract, risky. Ryan was ambitious, but he made a mistake in the financial reports. It could have cost the company millions. I tried to cover for him, fix it quietly, but when it came out, he blamed me to save his job. Emily's breath caught. He blamed you. Daniel nodded. He told the board I was the one who signed off on the bad numbers. And because he had seniority, they believed him. I lost everything, my position, my reputation, my team. She stared at him in shock. Why didn't you tell me before? He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Because I didn't want your opinion of me to be shaped by a mistake I didn't make. I wanted you to know me, not my past. Emily's chest ached. And he knew you were here. Yeah, Daniel said softly. He must have found out when I got hired at this firm. I guess he couldn't resist stirring things up. Emily looked down at the phone again. Ryan's last message still burning on the screen. He said, "You're not who I think you are." Daniel sighed. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm not perfect. I made bad calls. I trusted the wrong people. But everything I've said to you, everything we've built, none of that was a lie. Her eyes met his, searching, trembling. I believe you, she whispered. For the first time in days. Daniel's shoulders eased. You do. She nodded. Because I know what it's like to live with guilt. And I know what it's like to be judged for a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. A long silence fell between them, gentle, almost peaceful. The tension that had lingered for so long slowly melted away. Then Emily spoke again, voice softer now. You didn't have to carry all that alone, Daniel. He smiled sadly. Neither did you. That night, they left the office together. The air outside was cool and quiet, the city lights glowing like 1,000 tiny promises. They walked without speaking, side by side, the distance between them shrinking with every step. When they reached the parking lot, Daniel stopped. Emily, he said quietly, thank you for believing me when you didn't have to. She looked up at him, her expression soft. You believed in me too. Maybe that's why we found each other. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, Daniel reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered just long enough to send warmth rushing through her chest. Emily smiled faintly. You know, if you keep doing things like that, I might start thinking you're trying to make me fall for you. He chuckled softly. Maybe I am. Her laughter broke through the still night airlight, real, unguarded. It felt like the beginning of something good, something she didn't need to run from. The next morning, Emily woke to another message, this time from Ryan. I'm leaving town. I guess I needed to see you were okay. Goodbye, Emily. She stared at it for a long time before typing back just 2 words. Take care. It wasn't anger she felt, or relief. It was closure, quiet, steady, final. She set the phone down and glanced at the clock. It was early, barely 7, but she was already smiling. For the first time in years, she felt free. When she arrived at work later that morning, Daniel was there, waiting by her desk, as always. He handed her a cup of coffee with a grin. Double shot latte. Right. She laughed softly. You remember everything. He tilted his head. That's because I finally have something worth remembering. She felt her cheeks warm. You always know what to say. I try, he said, eyes glinting with warmth, but I'm still learning. Emily sipped her coffee, watching him quietly. For a moment, she saw not the man who'd lost everything or the colleague who'd stood by her through long nights, but someone who had chosen to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. And that, she realized, was what love really was. Not the rush of first chances or the pain of endings, but the quiet, steady courage to begin again. A few weeks later, they stood outside the same little park where everything had once felt broken. Only now, the air was clear, and the river shimmered in the afternoon light. Daniel looked at her, smiling. You know, if someone told me 6 months ago that I'd be here starting over with you, I wouldn't have believed them. Emily smiled back. Guess life has a strange way of putting the right people in your path. He took her hand gently. Or maybe the right people were there all along. We just needed time to find them. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. Then let's not waste it. Daniel squeezed her hand. Never. And as they walked along the riverbank, side by side, Emily finally understood sometimes. The moments that hurt the most lead to the ones that heal us completely. Because what Daniel did that night, when he reached out, when he caught her, when he stayed, hadn't just changed everything. It had saved her. The end.